I am Beverly, 32 years old, and I once believed that family meant everything, that blood was thicker than water. That sacrifice for those you love was the ultimate show of devotion. I was wrong. When I overheard my mother tell my brother, "Don't worry about Beverly. She's never said no to family," my entire world shattered. They were planning to let me take the fall for his crimes. After everything I had given them, everything I had sacrificed. No. This is the story of how I discovered their betrayal and how I ended them. Before I begin my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever felt betrayed by those who should have protected you. Trust me, you'll want to see how this ends. Growing up in our modest brick house in suburban Detroit, family meant everything to us. At least that's what I thought. Our neighborhood was the kind where everyone knew each other. Kids played together until streetlights came on and neighbors brought casseroles when someone was sick. A typical American dream setting that masked what was happening inside our home. My mother Elaine ran our household with iron discipline masked as love. She was a petite woman with perfectly coiffed auburn hair who never left the house without her lipstick. Her smile could warm a room, but her disappointment could freeze your heart. "Family first, Beverly," she would remind me constantly. "We only have each other in this world." My younger brother Gary was her undeniable favorite. 3 years younger than me, he had our father's charismatic smile and a gift for charming his way out of trouble. Gary could set the curtains on fire and somehow walk away with extra dessert while I'd be punished for not watching him closely enough. From the earliest days, I can remember I was cast as the responsible one, the fixer, the safety net. When Dad's hours got cut at the auto plant, I was the one who gave up weekend activities to babysit neighborhood kids for extra money. When Mom needed help with church fundraisers, my homework could wait, but Gary's football practice was sacred. "You're so capable, Beverly," Mom would say, her words wrapped in pride, but loaded with expectation. "You're just like me. We're the strong ones." I believed her. I wore that responsibility like a badge of honor. The first major sacrifice came when I was 18. I had worked myself to exhaustion throughout high school, maintaining a 4.0 GPA while working part-time. My hard work paid off with a full scholarship to Northwestern University. I was going to be the first in our family to attend college. The acceptance letter arrived on a Tuesday. On Thursday, Dad had his first heart attack. "I don't know how we'll manage," Mom said, sitting by Dad's hospital bed. "The medical bills, the house payments. And who will take care of your father during recovery?" Her eyes filled with tears as she looked at Gary. "And your brother needs stability right now. He's at such a critical age." Gary was 15, perfectly capable of helping out, but somehow the family's burden landed squarely on my shoulders. I deferred my scholarship. 1 year, I told myself. Just 1 year to help Dad recover and get the family back on financial track. That 1 year turned into 5. By then, Northwestern had given my scholarship to someone else, and my college fund had been drained for Gary's first failed business venture, a lawn care service that mysteriously needed new equipment every month but never seemed to have any customers. "He's finding his way." Mom defended when I questioned where the money had gone. "Men need to experiment before they settle down. Your brother has big dreams, and we need to support him." When I finally did make it to college, it was to the local community college, taking night classes while working full-time as an administrative assistant at a law firm. I chose to study for a paralegal certification, practical, employable, and affordable. Dreams of becoming an attorney myself were tucked away in the box of things I couldn't afford to want. The second major sacrifice came when Mom called me in tears at age 27. She was about to lose the house. Dad had passed away 2 years earlier, and apparently the mortgage had fallen behind. Gary, now 24, had moved back home after his second business failed, a car detailing service that somehow required expensive tools but produced few actual detailed cars. "We'll be out on the street," Mom sobbed. "All your father's memories gone." I had just received a small inheritance from my maternal grandmother, the only person who seemed to see me clearly. She had left Gary an equal amount, but his had disappeared within weeks. Mine was meant to be a down payment on my own place. Instead, I signed it over to my mother to save the family home, a home I didn't even live in anymore. "You're an angel," Mom said, hugging me tightly. "I don't know what we'd do without you." What she really meant was, I don't know who else we could manipulate so easily. By 32, I had built a decent life for myself despite everything. My position as a paralegal at Winters and Associates paid well enough for my modest one-bedroom apartment and reliable car. I had even managed to start a small savings account that I guarded fiercely from family emergencies. I had learned to set some boundaries, though the guilt trips from home were relentless. Susan from church was just telling me how her daughter surprised her with a vacation to Florida. Mom would sigh during our weekly calls. Some children really know how to show their appreciation, or Gary is having such a hard time getting his new business off the ground. He just needs a small loan for marketing. Nothing much, just a few thousand. You know he'd do the same for you. I'd learned to deflect without directly refusing, which kept the peace while protecting my resources. But deep down, I still believed in the sanctity of family. That blood meant something sacred. That one day all my sacrifices would be recognized and returned. That all changed with a single phone call on a rainy Tuesday in April. "Bevs, I need your help." Gary's voice had that familiar urgency. "This is the big one. The business that's going to change everything for all of us." I sighed, holding the phone between my ear and shoulder as I sorted through case files. "Gary, we've done this dance before." "No, this is different. I've got real investors this time, serious people. We're forming an actual corporation, Thompson Valley Investments. It's going to be huge." His voice dropped to that conspiratorial tone he used when he was about to ask for money. "But I need a favor. A real one-time favor." Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet him for coffee the next day. Just to hear him out. After all, he was family. I didn't know then that family would be the very thing that almost destroyed me. "You should see the projections, Bevs." Gary's eyes sparkled with the same excitement I'd seen countless times before. We sat in a corner booth at an upscale coffee shop I couldn't afford to visit regularly. His suit looked expensive, and the watch on his wrist was definitely new. "Where did you get the money for that Rolex?" I asked, ignoring his portfolio of colorful charts. Gary waved dismissively. "One of the perks of having investors who believe in you. Look, this isn't about money. Well, not your money anyway." He slid a glossy brochure across the table. Thompson Valley Investments promised exclusive returns for discerning clients and proprietary trading algorithms developed by industry experts. It looked legitimate, which was new for Gary. "So what's the favor?" I asked, cutting to the chase. Gary leaned forward, lowering his voice. "I need a partner I can trust. Someone with a clean financial record and background. The investors are particular about who they work with." A warning bell chimed faintly in my head. "You have a criminal record, Gary." "No, nothing like that." He laughed too quickly. "Just some credit issues from the past ventures. Business stuff. Look, it's simple. I need you to be listed as a co-owner on the paperwork. You'd have signing authority and technically be a partner, but I'd handle everything. You wouldn't have to do anything except attend the occasional meeting to show your face." "That doesn't sound simple at all," I replied, alarm bells now ringing louder. "Co-owner means co-responsible Gary." He reached across the table and took my hand. "Beverly, this is my chance to finally make something of myself. To make Mom proud. To pay you back for all the times you've helped me." His eyes, so much like our father's, pleaded with me. "I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. You know that right, family first, remember? Family first. The mantra of my childhood. The justification for every sacrifice." "I need to think about it," I said finally, "and I'd want to see all the paperwork before signing anything." "Of course," Gary brightened immediately. "I'll have everything sent over. And hey, Mom's making pot roast tonight. Your favorite. Why don't you come for dinner? Richard will be there too. He's my business partner. You can ask him anything you want. I agreed, ignoring the unease settling in my stomach. After all, I told myself this time I'm being careful. This time I'm asking questions first. At dinner that night, our childhood home was filled with the comforting aromas of Mom's cooking. For a moment, walking through that front door, I was transported back to simpler times before I understood the cost of family loyalty. Richard Carter was not what I expected. In his mid-40s with salt and pepper hair and a reserved demeanor, he seemed too serious for Gary's usual crowd. He answered my questions about the business directly, if somewhat stiffly explaining that Thompson Valley would focus on real estate investments and high-yield private loans. Your brother has a remarkable talent for identifying opportunities, Richard said, though his eyes didn't quite meet mine. With your background in legal work, you'd be an asset to the team. Throughout dinner, Mom kept refilling wine glasses and singing Gary's praises. I always knew he had it in him, she beamed. He just needed the right opportunity. When I asked specific questions about my role and responsibilities, Gary smoothly changed the subject. When I pressed about the client base, Mom interrupted with dessert. When I inquired about the company's banking arrangements, Gary insisted we toast to new beginnings instead. As the evening progressed, the subtle pressure mounted. Mom pulled out childhood photos reminiscing about how we always stuck together. Gary repeatedly mentioned how this business would finally allow him to take care of Mom the way she deserves. By the time I left, I had neither agreed nor refused, but the expectation hung heavy in the air. The documents Gary had promised arrived by courier the next morning, a thick stack of legal papers with yellow tabs indicating where my signature was needed. Something didn't feel right. The incorporation papers seemed standard, but the operating agreement contained vague language about management responsibilities and fiduciary obligations that made me uneasy. One section indicated that partners would be jointly and severally liable for company actions, which was definitely not how Gary had described my role. I spent my lunch break researching Thompson Valley investments. The website was impressive but thin on details. The business address was in a prestigious downtown building, but I couldn't find any reviews or Better Business Bureau information. Most concerning, when I searched Richard Carter's name plus investments, I found a 3-year-old complaint about aggressive investment tactics that had been settled out of court. That evening, Gary called twice, then texted, "Investors meeting tomorrow. Need signed papers by morning. Don't let me down, sis." Mom called next. "Gary is so excited, honey. I haven't seen him this happy since before your father passed. It would break my heart to see him disappointed again." The pressure was mounting, but so were my concerns. I decided to visit Gary's office unannounced the next day during my lunch break. I needed to see this business for myself before signing anything. If this was legitimate, I reasoned an unexpected visit shouldn't be a problem. The Thompson Valley office was on the 14th floor of the Madison building, an address impressive enough to raise my eyebrows. Had Gary finally created something real? The reception area was elegantly furnished but unmanned when I arrived. The door was unlocked, so I walked in calling out a hello that echoed in the empty space. That decision would change everything. The office was eerily quiet as I made my way past the empty reception desk. The space was impressive. Glass-walled conference rooms, sleek furniture, and city views from floor-to-ceiling windows. Everything looked expensive and legitimate, which only confused me more. How had Gary managed all this? "Hello?" I called again, hearing my voice bounce back from the marble flooring. "Gary Richard. Is anyone here?" No response. I walked deeper into the office suite, noting framed certificates on the walls and glossy brochures on side tables. It all looked so convincing, yet something felt off. The place had an unlived-in quality, like a model home staged for showing, but not for living. As I rounded a corner toward what appeared to be the main conference room, I heard voices. Stopping short, I realized the heavy door was ajar by just an inch or two. Through the crack, I could see Gary pacing back and forth, phone in hand, gesturing animatedly. The meeting's tomorrow. Yes, all the investors will be there, he was saying. No, it's handled. Beverly will sign the papers tonight. I froze at the mention of my name. Another voice responded. My mother's. I hadn't realized she was in the room. But what if she keeps asking questions? Mom's voice had a sharp edge I rarely heard. She was poking around quite a bit at dinner. Gary laughed, a cold sound I didn't recognize. Don't worry about Beverly. She's never said no to family. She'll sign. She's always been so responsible, Mom said, and I heard the smile in her voice. Unlike you with your escapades. Remember when you crashed her car and she took the blame so your insurance wouldn't go up? They both chuckled, and something cold slid down my spine. Once those papers are signed, everything's covered, Gary continued. If anything goes sideways, Beverly's signature is on all the important documents. She's the compliance officer on paper, the managing partner, the one responsible for investor communications. And if these investors realize their money is redirected, Mom asked, by then we'll be restructured, money moved offshore, and Beverly will be left holding the bag. Gary's voice was casual, as if discussing weather rather than destroying my life. With her background, the authorities will assume she knew exactly what she was doing. How long do we have before anyone catches on? Mom asked. 6 months, maybe a year if we're lucky. Richard's getting nervous, but I've got leverage on him from the last venture. He'll play along. And Beverly? Mom's voice had an odd tone. Not concern for me, but for the plan. Beverly will do what she always does, clean up the family mess. Except this time, she'll take the fall. Worst case, she does a few years for securities fraud, while we enjoy early retirement somewhere warm. My mother, my own mother, laughed. She always was the responsible one, so concerned with doing the right thing, so easy to manipulate. The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. Blood rushed in my ears, nearly drowning out their continued conversation. I gripped the wall to steady myself, feeling physically ill. We'll need to keep her distracted while everything processes, Gary was saying. Keep her focused on feeling important, being part of something successful. You know how desperate she is for approval. Leave that to me, Mom replied. I've been managing Beverly her entire life. A few more months is nothing. I must have made a noise, a gasp or whimper, because they suddenly went silent. Fighting panic, I quickly backed away and slipped into a nearby restroom, locking the door behind me. I leaned against the cool marble countertop, staring at my reflection in the mirror. The woman who looked back at me was a stranger, pale, shaken with eyes that had just witnessed the death of everything she believed in. Family, love, loyalty, trust, all lies. My entire life had been a careful construction of manipulation. Every sacrifice I'd made, college, career opportunities, financial security, had been expertly extracted through guilt and obligation. And now they planned to sacrifice my freedom, my future, my very life for their gain. Prison. They were planning to let me go to prison for their crimes. Minutes passed as I struggled to breathe normally, to think clearly through the roaring in my head. I splashed cold water on my face and forced myself to focus. I couldn't confront them now. It would only warn them, give them time to adjust their plans. To create another trap. No. For once in my life, I needed to put myself first. To use the very skills life had forced me to develop. Responsibility, attention to detail, and the ability to clean up complicated messes. I waited until I heard voices moving away down the hall, then slipped out of the bathroom and made my way quickly to the exit. My mind was already racing, formulating what I needed to do next. This wasn't just about protecting myself anymore. This was about justice. About finally standing up against a lifetime of exploitation. They thought I was predictable, easy to manipulate, the responsible one who always sacrificed herself for family. They had no idea what I was capable of when betrayed. Back at my apartment that evening, I moved in a state of controlled fury, organizing my thoughts and making lists. The paralegal in me took over, methodically planning how to gather evidence, document the fraud, and protect myself. The daughter and sister in me grieved silently, mourning the family I thought I had. First, I needed to understand exactly what Gary and Mom were planning. Knowledge would be my armor. I called in sick to work the next day, something I never did, and used the time to begin my investigation. Starting with the documents Gary had sent, I went through every page with meticulous care, highlighting problematic clauses and making notes. My paralegal training was finally serving me rather than others. The scheme was both simple and insidious. Thompson Valley Investments was indeed a registered company, but the paperwork positioned me as the managing partner and compliance officer, the person legally responsible for ensuring all securities laws were followed. Gary was listed merely as a business development consultant with limited liability. If investors lost money, I would be the one legally accountable. The business model itself was a classic Ponzi scheme. New investor money would be used to pay returns to earlier investors, creating the illusion of successful trading, while Gary and Mom siphoned funds through a network of shell companies. My signature would make it all possible, and make me the perfect scapegoat. By mid-afternoon, I had filled a legal pad with notes and questions. I needed more information, and I knew just who might provide it. Richard Carter looked surprised when he opened his front door to find me standing there. I had found his address through a property record search, one of many skills I'd developed as a paralegal. "Beverly, what are you doing here?" His eyes darted nervously past me to the street. "We need to talk, Richard," I said firmly, "about Thompson Valley, about what's really happening." His face drained of color. "I don't know what you mean." "I think you do, and I think you're uncomfortable with it." I held his gaze steadily. "I overheard Gary and my mother yesterday. I know what they're planning to do to me." Richard's shoulders sagged in defeat. He glanced around once more before stepping back. "You'd better come in." Over the next hour, Richard confirmed everything I'd suspected and revealed details I hadn't known. He'd met Gary through a legitimate investment group where Gary had charmed his way into partnerships by promising access to wealthy clients. The first few deals had been small but legitimate. Then Gary had suggested bigger investments, exclusive opportunities, and special purpose vehicles that became increasingly questionable. By the time I realized what was happening, I was already implicated. Richard admitted shame evident in his voice. "Gary has documentation that makes it look like I orchestrated the earlier misappropriations. He's threatened to go to the authorities if I don't cooperate." "And my role?" I asked, though I already knew. "You're the insurance policy, the person who takes responsibility if it all falls apart." He couldn't meet my eyes. "I tried to make the documents obviously suspicious, hoping you'd refuse to sign. I'm sorry." "Sorry doesn't help me now," I said coldly. "But your testimony might." Before leaving, I convinced Richard to document everything he knew about the scheme. He agreed to help me in exchange for leniency when the time came to involve authorities. I recorded our conversation on my phone and had him sign a statement I drafted on the spot. My next stop was to see Janice Moore, an attorney I had worked with at the law firm. We weren't close friends, but I respected her legal acumen and ethical standards. More importantly, she specialized in securities law. "This is beyond serious, Beverly," Janice said after reviewing my evidence and Richard's statement. "We're talking federal charges, significant prison time, and they were setting you up to take all of it." "What are my options?" I asked. "First, do not sign anything, not a single document." Janice's expression was grave. "Second, we need to document everything meticulously. Third, we need to decide whether to go to the authorities now or gather more evidence. If I go to the authorities now, they might not have enough to prosecute. Gary and Mom could claim innocence, say Richard is lying to save himself." I thought about how charming Gary could be, how respectable my mother appeared. I need irrefutable evidence. I need them to incriminate themselves. Janice looked concerned. "That's risky. They're actively committing fraud. Every day, more investors could be losing money. Give me 1 week, I insisted. 1 week to gather enough evidence that they can't possibly escape justice. Reluctantly, Janice agreed but insisted on drafting protective documents for me. Affidavits swearing I had no knowledge of or involvement in any fraudulent activities dated and notarized before any investor meetings took place. And Beverly, Janice added as I was leaving, be careful. People willing to send family members to prison aren't people who play by normal rules. That night I called Gary. I've been reviewing the documents, I said, keeping my voice casual. I have a few questions before I sign. Questions? Gary sounded immediately suspicious. It's all standard stuff, Bevs. I'm sure it is, but I need to understand what I'm signing. You know me, responsible to a fault. I forced a laugh, tasting bitterness. How about I come by the office tomorrow? You can walk me through everything. After some resistance, Gary agreed. Fine, but make it after 5. We've got investor meetings all day. No problem. Oh, and Gary, I'm really proud of you for putting this together. It seems so professional. His voice warmed with pride, always his weakness. Thanks, sis. It means a lot to hear you say that. As I hung up, I felt nothing but cold determination. The plan was in motion. I would appear to go along with their scheme while collecting evidence at every step. I would be the perfect devoted sister and daughter, right until the moment I wasn't. For once, the family trait of manipulation would serve me instead of being used against me. The next evening, I arrived at the Thompson Valley offices, wearing a recording device Janice had provided. Michigan is a one-party consent state for recordings, which meant I could legally record any conversation I participated in without informing the other parties. The small device was tucked into my bra, nearly invisible but powerful enough to capture clear audio. There's my brilliant sister. Gary greeted me with a hug that now felt like an assault. Ready to join the family business. I've got all the documents, I said, patting my bag. But I still have questions before I sign. Of course. Gary led me into the main conference room, where to my surprise, Mom was waiting. I didn't expect to see you here, I said, working to keep my voice neutral despite the rage bubbling beneath the surface. I wouldn't miss this moment, Mom replied, coming to embrace me. My children, working together at last. Her perfume, the same she'd worn my entire life, now smelled cloying and false. Her arms around me felt like restraints. How had I never noticed before? For the next hour, I played the role they expected. The responsible but naive sister, asking just enough questions to seem diligent, but not enough to raise suspicions. I took notes, requested clarifications, and acted impressed by their answers, all while the recorder captured everything. So these investor funds will be going into real estate developments, I asked, pointing to a specific clause. Exactly. Gary nodded enthusiastically. Premium properties with guaranteed returns. And which properties have you already acquired? I pushed gently. Gary waved dismissively. We're in negotiations for several prime locations. Can't say more due to confidentiality, but they're incredible opportunities. And as compliance officer, I'd need to verify these investments correct. A flicker of annoyance crossed Gary's face. Technically, yes, but I'll handle all that. Your role is more ceremonial. Investors like seeing someone with legal background in the leadership. Ceremonial, but with all the legal responsibility, I noted, keeping my tone light. Quite a combination, Mom interjected smoothly. Beverly, darling, you're overthinking this. Your brother has built something wonderful here. Don't you want to be part of his success, after all we've been through as a family? The guilt trip. So familiar it almost made me laugh. Instead, I softened my expression. Of course I do. I just want to understand what I'm signing. Gary slid the signature pages toward me. Then let's make it official. This was the moment of truth. I had discussed this scenario with Janice. I could refuse to sign and walk away, the safest option for me personally. Or I could sign with modifications that would protect me legally while allowing me to continue gathering evidence. I chose the latter. I just need to make one small adjustment, I said, taking out my pen. On each signature page, I added a handwritten notation, signing under condition that all transactions comply with SEC regulations and subject to independent verification. Then I initialed and dated each notation. Gary frowned. "What's that you're adding?" "Just standard legal protection," I said casually. "It doesn't change anything if everything's legitimate, which I'm sure it is." He looked like he wanted to object, but couldn't find a reasonable way to do so. "Find whatever makes you comfortable." "That's my careful girl," Mom said with a tight smile, always crossing her T's and dotting her I's. After signing the modified documents, I made sure to collect copies of everything. "I'll need these for my records." "Let's celebrate," Gary declared, clearly relieved to move past the paperwork. "Dinner at Giovanni's, my treat." At the upscale restaurant, they ordered champagne and toasted to family success. I sipped sparingly, needing to keep my wits sharp. As the alcohol flowed, Gary became increasingly grandiose about the business prospects. "We'll be millionaires by this time next year," he boasted. "Proper millionaires. Houses in the Hamptons, European vacations." "And how exactly will that happen?" I asked innocently. "Through the real estate investments." Gary winked conspiratorially. "Let's just say I've developed a system that guarantees returns. The SEC might have some questions, but by the time they figure it out, we'll be set for life." Mom patted his hand proudly. "My son, always the clever one." I smiled and raised my glass. To beating the system. The recorder captured it all. Over the next few days, I continued my performance as the eager new partner while systematically gathering evidence. I arrived early to the office and stayed late copying documents, taking photos, and making notes. I identified the earliest investors and through careful research found contact information for several. Under the guise of introductory calls, I spoke with these investors, documenting their understanding of where their money was going and what returns they'd been promised. Many had invested their life savings believing Gary's promises of exceptional guaranteed returns. The more I discovered, the larger the fraud appeared. Gary hadn't just been planning to steal from new investors. He'd already misappropriated hundreds of thousands of dollars from existing clients. The money trail led to offshore accounts, luxury purchases, and cash withdrawals. Most disturbing was discovering that he'd used my social security number and identity to open several accounts without my knowledge. He hadn't just been planning to frame me, he'd already begun. I documented everything meticulously, creating copies and storing them in multiple secure locations. Janice reviewed my growing evidence file daily, helping me organize it for maximum legal impact. 5 days into my investigation, the confrontation I'd been avoiding finally came. Gary stormed into the office while I was examining the actual investment contracts. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he demanded, slamming the door behind him. I looked up calmly, though my heart was racing. "Just familiarizing myself with our business operations. That's my job as compliance officer, isn't it? You've been asking questions, calling investors, going through files you have no business touching." His face was flushed with anger and fear. "I'm being thorough," I replied, standing to face him. "Is there a problem with that?" Gary stepped closer, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper. "Listen carefully, Beverly. You're here to sign papers and look pretty for the investors. Nothing more. If you can't handle that simple task, we'll have to reconsider your involvement." "Reconsider how?" I asked, meeting his gaze steadily. "By finding another family member to frame for your crimes." His eyes widened in shock, then narrowed dangerously. "I don't know what you think you heard." "I heard everything, Gary. You and Mom in the conference room last week. How I'd take the fall if things went sideways. How I'd do prison time while you enjoyed retirement somewhere warm." The color drained from his face. "Beverly, you misunderstood." Did I misunderstand the offshore accounts in my name that I never opened? Or the investor funds that disappeared into your personal expenses, or Mom's new car that mysteriously appeared last month? Gary's expression shifted from shock to calculation. "We're family Bevs. Everything I do benefits all of us. You've always understood that family comes first. Family doesn't frame family for federal crimes, I replied coldly. He reached for my arm, but I stepped back. You need to remember who's always been there for you, he hissed. Who took care of you when Dad died? Who gave you a place to stay when you were struggling? I almost laughed at the blatant revision of history. Is that what Mom told you, that she took care of me? I paid the mortgage on her house. I deferred college to work when Dad got sick. I've been supporting both of you for years. And now it's time for you to support the family in a different way. Gary's voice hardened. By doing what you're told. The mask had fully dropped now. No more pretense of brotherly love or family unity, just naked self-interest and the expectation that I would sacrifice myself on the altar of family obligation. The investor meeting is tomorrow, I said, gathering my things calmly. I'll be there. Beverly, Gary called as I reached the door. Remember who you're dealing with. Remember what's at stake. I turned back to look at him, this stranger wearing my brother's face. I remember everything now, Gary. That's what you should be worried about. The next morning dawned bright and clear. Perfect weather for justice. The Thompson Valley conference room was set up for the investor presentation, with elegant refreshments and glossy handouts describing fictional investment properties. 12 people representing millions in potential investments would be arriving at 10. I had been up most of the night making final preparations with Janice. Everything was in place. The authorities had been notified and were standing by. The evidence was organized and conclusive. Now I just needed to get through the final act of this family tragedy. I arrived early, dressed in a conservative blue suit that projected competence and trustworthiness. Gary was already there, looking tense despite his polished appearance. Everything okay? I asked innocently. Fine, he snapped. Just stick to the script today. Introduce yourself as the compliance officer, assure everyone their investments are secure, and let me handle the rest. Whatever you say, Gary. I smiled pleasantly. Where's Mom? She'll be here soon. She's bringing Richard. Interesting. They were keeping Richard close, making sure he didn't cause problems. I wondered if they suspected he had already turned on them. The investors began arriving shortly before 10, mostly older individuals and couples looking to secure their retirement. Many knew Gary from previous community connections. They greeted me warmly as the legal expert who would ensure their money was properly handled. Each handshake, each trusting smile strengthened my resolve. These weren't wealthy people who could absorb losses. These were regular folks who had worked hard their entire lives saving carefully for retirement or their grandchildren's education. People like my father who had believed in honest work and fair dealing. Mom arrived with Richard just as everyone was being seated. She looked elegant and maternal in a cream-colored dress, every inch the respectable business partner. Only I could see the calculating coldness behind her warm smile. Welcome, everyone, Gary began enthusiastically. Today marks an exciting new chapter for Thompson Valley Investments. We're thrilled to have you join our exclusive investment family. He proceeded to outline the proprietary investment strategy that would generate consistent double-digit returns regardless of market conditions. The presentation was slick, filled with impressive charts and testimonials from early investors who had received their promised returns, paid, I now knew, with newer investors' money. And now I'd like to introduce my sister, Beverly Thompson, our Chief Compliance Officer, Gary said, gesturing for me to stand. Beverly brings her legal expertise to ensure all our operations exceed regulatory requirements. This was my moment. I stood slowly looking around the room at the expectant faces. People who trusted us with their financial futures. People being systematically deceived by my own family. Thank you, Gary, I began calmly. Before we proceed, I'd like to clarify my role with Thompson Valley Investments. Gary's smile faltered slightly. This wasn't in his script. As Chief Compliance Officer, my primary responsibility is to ensure all activities of this company adhere strictly to securities laws and regulations. I paused, meeting the eyes of several investors. It's a responsibility I take extremely seriously. From my briefcase, I removed a folder, which is why I feel compelled to share some concerning information I've uncovered during my review of company operations. Gary stepped forward quickly. Beverly, this isn't the appropriate. It's exactly the appropriate time, I cut him off firmly, before anyone in this room commits their hard-earned money to this venture. Mom rose from her seat, alarm clear on her face. Perhaps we should take a short break. No breaks, I said, my voice stronger now. These people deserve the truth. I opened the folder and began distributing documents to the stunned investors. What you're receiving is evidence that Thompson Valley Investments is not what it claims to be. There are no real estate properties, no proprietary trading algorithms, no secure investments of any kind. The room erupted in confused murmurs. Gary lunged for the documents, but several investors pulled them away protectively. What you're looking at, I continued over the growing chaos, is proof that this company is operating a Ponzi scheme. Early investor returns are being paid with new investor money, while substantial funds are being diverted to personal accounts. She's lying, Gary shouted, face flushed with fury. Beverly has mental health issues. She's always been jealous of my success. Is that why you and Mom plan to frame me for your crimes? I asked quietly, pulling out my phone. Let's hear what you both had to say when you thought no one was listening. The recording played clearly through the room's speakers, which I had connected to earlier. Gary and Mom's voices filled the space, discussing how I would take the fall and do a few years for securities fraud, while they enjoyed early retirement somewhere warm. The investors' expressions transformed from confusion to shock to outrage. One elderly man stood up, pointing a trembling finger at Gary. I trusted you with my entire retirement fund. Mom attempted damage control, her voice taking on the soothing tone she'd used my entire life to manipulate situations. There's clearly been a misunderstanding. Beverly has twisted things out of context. The only thing twisted here is what you've done to these people, to me, your own daughter. I turned to face her directly. Did you ever love me, Mom? Or was I just a convenient resource to exploit? For a moment, her mask slipped completely, revealing the cold calculation beneath. You were always so willing to sacrifice, so eager for approval. It made you useful. A collective gasp went through the room at her callousness. The conference room doors opened, and Janice entered, followed by 2 FBI agents and a representative from the Securities and Exchange Commission. Perfect timing, I said, nodding to Janice. Everyone, this is my attorney, Janice Moore. These gentlemen are from the FBI and SEC. They've been fully briefed on the situation. Beverly Thompson, one agent asked, though he clearly knew who I was. We had spoken extensively the previous day. Yes, thank you for coming. I handed him a flash drive. This contains all the evidence I've gathered, including bank records, falsified investment reports, and recordings of multiple conversations documenting the fraud. Gary lunged towards the exit but was quickly intercepted by the second agent. You can't do this, he shouted at me. We're family. Family doesn't send family to prison, I replied, echoing my words from the day before. As the agents began reading rights and explaining the investigation process to the stunned investors, Mom approached me, her voice low and venomous. After everything I've done for you, she hissed, this is how you repay your family. I looked at this woman who had given birth to me, raised me, and systematically exploited me my entire life. You taught me that family comes first, Mom. You just never specified which family member. Her face contorted with rage as an agent approached to escort her away. You'll regret this. You'll have no one. I already had no one, I replied calmly. Now I just know it. As they were led away, Gary called out one last time. Beverly, you can still fix this. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. But there was nothing to fix. For the first time in my life, I had chosen myself over toxic family obligations. I had chosen truth over manipulation. justice over blind loyalty. And watching them leave in handcuffs, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: freedom. The months following what the local press dubbed the Thompson Valley investment scandal were both challenging and transformative. The legal proceedings moved forward methodically, with Gary and Mom facing multiple federal charges for securities fraud, wire fraud, and money laundering. Richard Carter, true to our agreement, provided testimony in exchange for reduced charges. His cooperation, combined with the mountain of evidence I had gathered, created an airtight case that even the most expensive defense attorneys couldn't dismantle. I worked closely with the FBI and SEC to help recover as much money as possible for the defrauded investors. Some funds were still in accessible accounts, while others had been spent on luxury items that could be liquidated. It wasn't a complete recovery, but it provided some relief to the victims. The first few weeks after the arrests, I existed in a state of emotional numbness. I went through the motions of daily life, work, meals, sleep, while processing the complete destruction of my family. Not just their absence, but the realization that the loving family I thought I had never actually existed. "It's normal to grieve," Janice told me over coffee one afternoon. She had shifted from legal advisor to friend during the ordeal. "You're mourning the family you thought you had, the relationships you believed in." How could I have been so blind? I asked a question I'd been turning over endlessly in my mind. All those years, all those sacrifices, how did I not see what they were doing? "Because you're a good person who assumes others operate with the same moral code," Janice replied. "And because they were experts at manipulation. They had been conditioning you your entire life." The anger came next, overwhelming waves of fury that would hit unexpectedly. Anger at them for their betrayal. Anger at myself for being so easily manipulated for so long. I took up kickboxing, finding that physical exertion helped channel the rage into something productive. In the empty apartment after intense workouts, I would sometimes find myself talking aloud to my younger self, the girl who had deferred her dreams to help her family. The young woman who had believed that sacrifice was love. "It wasn't your fault," I would tell her. "You deserved better." Gradually, painfully, I began rebuilding my life. I started therapy, working through the complex trauma of lifelong manipulation and exploitation. I reconnected with old friends I had drifted away from during years of family obligations. I even enrolled in night law school, the dream I had abandoned years ago. 6 months after the arrests, Gary and Mom accepted plea deals rather than face trial. The evidence against them was overwhelming, and their lawyers advised that a jury would show little sympathy given the nature of their crimes and their willingness to frame their own daughter/sister. Gary received 8 years in federal prison. Mom got 5 years with consideration for her age. Neither showed any remorse during sentencing. Gary blamed his difficult upbringing, and Mom cited financial pressures as a widow, narratives that the judge dismissed as self-serving excuses. I attended the sentencing hearing, sitting quietly in the back of the courtroom. Not out of family loyalty, but to witness the conclusion of this chapter of my life. To see justice served for their crimes, not just against investors, but against me. As they were led away in handcuffs, neither looked back at me. I hadn't expected them to. Real remorse would require self-reflection they weren't capable of. Outside the courthouse, a reporter asked how I felt about testifying against my own family. "Family isn't just about shared DNA," I replied after considering the question. "Real family supports you, respects you, and wants what's best for you. Real family doesn't exploit you or try to send you to prison for their crimes." That evening, alone in my apartment, I didn't feel the emptiness I had feared. Instead, I felt something unexpected: peace. The weight of obligation, of never being enough, of constant sacrifice, it was gone. I called Donna, a coworker who had supported me throughout the ordeal and had become a true friend. "Would you like to get dinner?" I asked. "I feel like celebrating." "Celebrating the sentencing?" she asked cautiously. "No," I replied. "Celebrating the beginning of my life on my own terms." Over dinner, Donna raised her glass. To new beginnings. I smiled, feeling genuine happiness for the first time in months. To chosen family. Because that's what I was building now. Connections based on mutual respect and genuine caring rather than obligation and exploitation. People who valued me for who I was, not what I could do for them. In the year that followed, I created boundaries I never knew I needed and discovered strengths I never knew I had. I advanced at work, made progress in law school, and even started dating, approaching relationships with healthier expectations and greater self-respect. Sometimes I still caught myself falling into old patterns, feeling excessive responsibility, putting others' needs before my own, seeking approval through sacrifice. Old habits die hard. But now I recognize these tendencies and could redirect them. On the 1-year anniversary of the arrests, I visited my father's grave. We had been close when I was young before illness took him too soon. I often wondered if he had known what kind of people his wife and son truly were, if he had tried to protect me in his own way. "I'm okay, Dad," I said, placing flowers on his headstone. "Better than okay, actually. I'm becoming the person I was meant to be all along." The path forward wasn't perfect or painless. There were still difficult days when the betrayal felt fresh. Holidays were particularly challenging, highlighting the absence of traditional family. But each day I grew stronger, more authentic, more comfortable in my own skin. I learned that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. That boundaries aren't walls, but healthy definitions of what we will and won't accept in our lives. That true love never requires self-destruction. If you're watching this and something in my story resonates with you, know this: you deserve to be valued for who you are, not just what you can do for others. You deserve relationships that build you up, not drain you dry. And sometimes the family we choose is more real than the family we're born into. The most important lesson I learned: blood might be thicker than water, but that doesn't mean it's healthier. Sometimes the clearest waters reflect our truest selves. Have you ever had to choose between family obligation and self-preservation? Share your experience in the comments below. If my story helped you in any way, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories of overcoming adversity. Remember, your worth isn't measured by how much you sacrifice for others, but by how authentically you live your own truth. Thank you for listening, and I wish you the courage to stand firm in your own value.